You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Let me ask you a question. Do you ever get this? You get an email from somebody out of the blue, somebody you never met, who wants you to do something or turn up at something or be involved in something.
You're going to say signed but with an X.
No. And then you respond. And then 2 weeks later, it strikes you, I've never had a response to my response. I wonder if my response went missing or went to the wrong address or whatever. And then after 2 weeks, you get a follow-up to the first email saying, well, if you think you're too big to respond to my emails, you know what I mean? All it would take is a simple yes or no, and then you get really cross. And
you actually had that.
Then you respond again to the
say, this is the thing I sent you 2 weeks ago.
Well, yeah. I mean, you must have had that kind of thing. Well, because only one thought goes through your mind: spam filter.
Yeah.
You've sent this to somebody whose spam filter is cutting it out, is holding it back for one reason or another. And then you keep getting emails and you're really frustrated because you're responding. And the more you respond, the worse it gets. You know what I mean? They're all going into it. This kind of screaming void.
Rage. Yeah.
So anyway, if you're the person who emailed me and is thinking how cross you are that I haven't responded to you, check your spam filter. It might be there. Okay. All right. Moving on.
That's off your chest.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I just had to get it off my chest. So, Barry Cryer.
Oh, Barry Cryer.
Barry Cryer, a person very close to our hearts.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful man.
Well, you must have met him on more than one occasion.
I met him loads of times, actually. Yeah, he was the kind of MC of the oldie magazine lunches, which I've been to a few. I thought he was absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that everybody is universally loved, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
One of those people, a bit like Sean Locke, where the first thing everyone says is, I met him and I thought he was just absolutely adorable.
Yeah.
And he really was. And that lovely idea that he had a joke for every guy. His son described him as a comedy jukebox, which is a brilliant thing. You take a subject and he had a gag.
He's got one.
I know, it's so funny. And also the most selfless guy and incredibly connected with the younger generation, wasn't he? It wasn't like he got off the bus at one point. No. You know, he was touring with Tony DeMere, although Tony DeMere is not particularly young, but, you know, and playing Glastonbury and things like that and supporting all these new comedy people. And he was just a delightful guy.
I tell you,
the gorgeous chuckle when he was on the radio. You just
That's
hear
the
him
thing. On panel games, he did the thing that most panelists don't do, because most comedians, in my experience, they're not very generous with their laughter.
No.
If anybody else has made
They're
the joke.
worried about their slot and making
Whereas
the right
Barry
impact.
Cryer was always very generous. You could hear him laughing at other comics' gags.
And really selfless. You know, people have, there was an interview with him recently where he's been asked about Morecambe and Wise, who wrote a lot for him, and said his favourite Morecambe and Wise gag. You think he might mention something he wrote. He doesn't. He mentions an Eric Morecambe gag. It's that lovely one where they have Vera Lynn on. And Morecambe decided it'd be really funny if she pretended she didn't know she'd been asked to sing. And so Ernie goes, how are we going to get her to sing? And Eric goes, well, short of starting another war, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Really good.
It's interesting in the people's reminiscences of Barry Cryer this week, the number of people who said, he used to ring me up.
I know.
Regularly. Well, so
on my birthday.
Obviously, every morning he must have had a list of about 10 people. He just had to ring and tell a gag to. You know, that was just the kind of person
he always rang people on their birthdays, didn't he? Fellow comedians. It's interesting that he rang pretty much all of them. You know, and they were all. The first person went, well, you know, you won't believe this, but he used to ring me on my birthday. And then by the 100th person saying, you know, as you say, this must have been a kind of full-time occupation.
I've got my one personal reminiscence, which really goes back a long. It must go back 40 years now. I count them, because I think it will have been in 1982 or 1981 that Smash Hit sent me down to a recording of the Kenny Everett video show down in Teddington,
which he co-wrote, didn't he?
Which he was one of the writers and kind of co-producer. Really, he was there, you know. And so there was Kenny Everett, and I think that John Junkin might have been involved as well.
Yeah,
and Barry Cryer. And the guest group, the pop group, were the Pretenders. You know, the original lineup of the Pretenders: Chrissie Hynde, Pete Farndon, James Honeyman Scott. What's the drummer called? Martin Chambers. There you go. And they were doing some spoof where they were they were supposed to be dressed up as a kind of outrageous punk rock group, that I think if you go back and look at the issue of Smash Hits, you'll see pictures of Chrissie Hynde all done up with kind of safety pins and so forth. And James Honeyman Scott decided that he would complete the look if he removed his shirt. And so he took to the stage to be filmed wearing leather trousers, boots, and no shirt. And I was standing there looking at him while Barry Crowd just wandered past. Oh, it reminds me, must get some lard. And I'm pretty sure I quoted it in the piece, actually.
That is, I hope you did. Oh, that's really funny. I always thought that one of his funniest jokes was that because it was so surreal, you just don't expect the ending. And I'm sure you know it. Do you know the one about the guy who walks into the pub and half his head is half of a huge orange? Do you know this one?
Go on.
And the publican says, look, it's really rude. And I shouldn't really be asking, but I'm just curious. How come half your head is half of a huge orange? And he said, oh, well, I was up in the attic the other day and I found this lamp and I was giving it a polish. And this genie came out and, usual things are 3 wishes. And I said, my first wish was I could have £1 million and in my pocket. And every time I took it out, it'd be replaced by another £1 million. He says, okay, wish granted. And second wish, I'd like a big house with 100 beautiful women. He says, no problem, that's granted too. And when he said, what's your third wish? I said, I'd like to have half my head as half of a huge orange.
Oh, well.
So funny because you just can't see it coming. Oh, God.
So God bless Barry Cryer.
I know,
a life well lived,
Absolutely.
Entertaining to the end. I bought some CDs. I want to tell you about the CDs I bought this week.
Go on.
Because it's really odd the way things find their way to you. It arrived yesterday. I bought Marvin Gaye's Hear My Dear.
Oh,
the famous record, the kind of
he
divorce
made about
record.
his divorce. Yeah, exactly.
About his divorce from Anna Gordy. Why did I buy that, Mark? Because you might know why I bought this. I'm not getting divorced. Why we got a hint this week to buy this, didn't we? It's interesting how this has worked during lockdown. We've been talking to loads of guests via Zoom, either kind of journalists and DJs and so forth, or Patreon supporters celebrating their birthday, where people talk about their favorite records or the best record ever made or whatever. And it's remarkable how many times I'm doing these things. I think, do you know, I've never heard that record, or I haven't heard it for years or whatever. And I'll go away and listen to it again. David Sigerson was talking about this week, wasn't he, Mark?
He was.
Marvin Gaye, Here My Dear. We did the great David Sigerson, who kind of songwriter, record executive, record maker, journalist,
He's
novelist.
the guy behind our great Christmas favourite single, which we always plug every year, which is It's a Big Country.
It's a Big Country.
Yeah. Records in the early 80s. Fantastic.
And, that was one of his nominations for Greatest Record Ever Made, Here My Dear. Here's another one, actually. It's really unexpected stuff. Miles Davis, Jack Johnson, which he recommended.
Yeah, he was talking about that too. Yeah.
Which I've been playing a lot of. So I want to know if you've ever had this. I got this week. The complete recordings of Blossom Dearie, the great jazz singer. The complete recordings from 1952 to 1962. So there's something like 9 albums here on these 4 CDs. So they're all crammed in. It's a kind of budget label. It's really well done. There's hundreds and hundreds of tracks, 4 CDs. Have you ever had that thing where you open a 4 CD package for the first time and you hear that distant clicking sound that indicates a little bit of the plastic casing has just detached from the main thing, which means for the rest of your life with this CD, you won't really dare take it out.
Yeah.
Will somebody please, I know this may be a bit late in the game for the CD, will somebody please invent a decent way of holding 4 CDs in some kind of jewel case that doesn't absolutely drive you mad? Anyway, that's my grouse. And I got to plug one thing. Floating Points. Have you ever heard of Floating Points?
No.
Floating Points is the name of a British keyboard player, artist, musician. This is a record he's made with the London Symphony Orchestra and Pharoah Sanders. Pharoah Sanders, the great jazz saxophone player. I didn't know Pharoah Sanders was still with us. And this was recommended by Will Hodgkinson of the Times. I recommended it as one of his records of last year. Will Hodgkinson is going to be joining us, isn't
we're going to work in your attic with him.
In due course for Word in Your Attic. And so I read this. He recommended this. And I thought, that sounds intriguing. So I got that. And it is intriguing. Absolutely. If you're just looking for a record that's completely not like anything else that you've got, have a go at that. That's my recommendation.
We should do a regular thing, actually, because the things that people mention to us on Word in Your Attic, it is true. You go back and listen to them and rediscover them, and it's brilliant, isn't it?
Or I've never heard them, because that's the thing. People always say, "Oh, have you never heard so?"
Yeah.
I hate it when people say you get that occasion.
Have you never? So you're meant to know a lot about music, and
but it's also the implication that that they've heard everything.
Yeah.
No, they haven't. They've just heard those things.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Come up with hundreds of things that they've never heard.
It's like I was thinking this. We were talking to Bob Stanley this week, and Bob Stanley's got a new book coming out in May, which is kind of largely about pre-rock and roll popular music, isn't it? It's from the kind of the late 19th century.
Yeah, it's the invention of the 78 up until the kind of late 60s.
And of course, Bob knows a huge amount about music, probably a lot more than I do. But the thing I remember so vividly learning this when in my mid-20s, I went to work in a huge record shop, knowing a lot about music. And within 2 days, you realize what I know about music is about that much of what there is to know about music. Because you're surrounded by people who A, know a lot more than you do, B, know a lot about different things than you do, And the great thing about Bob's book is it's a kind of journey of discovery of loads and loads of other things that he wasn't wildly familiar with, So it's the antithesis of, oh, have you never heard that?
Completely wrong. Mostly it's about blues singers and jazz singers and ragtime and stuff like that. But funny enough, one of the tracks we were talking about was a song called Michelangelo by the 23rd Turnoff.
Yes.
Psychedelic group. It's a classic thing to be. And I had a look at them. Actually, when I played it, he sent it to me. Actually,
he sent it to me.
I remembered I'd heard it, and it was
really? Wow,
wonderful. It's really wonderful. But there's a group that just appeared. I think they only made one single. That's it, and it's just fantastic. And
I think the re-emerged.
Undiscovered stories waiting for you.
One of them re-emerged a few years later as member of the Liverpool Express.
He did,
who had a little bit of success, I think. So.
He did.
I love that idea that there's no music so obscure that it hasn't got somebody in the world.
Somebody waving a flag.
Carrying a little torch.
Carrying a torch, I know. It's partly its obscurity that makes them want to carry a torch. From the moment lots of people discover it, they'll drop it. But it's brilliant. So look, are you following the Neil Young Spotify story?
I wouldn't say following. I attempt to trace it to its source, which is always the difficulty with these stories, because you kind of arrive at these stories at the point where everybody's taking these massive positions on things, and then you go back and you try and work out where did this all come from, and it's usually a lot less impressive than the postures that people adopt should might indicate. Because actually, Neil Young removed from Spotify. I went and looked this morning, and he's still on Spotify. So if you want to listen to Heart of Gold on Spotify, you can do that, And the same thing applies to Joni Mitchell. It's all there because presumably taking your music off these
probably
services,
really complicated.
It's possibly.
They're probably thinking this might all die down, and we'll just all forget about it.
I don't know. I don't know how the ownership of these things work and what kind of control people have got over.
Also, he sold half his song catalogue, didn't he? So,
I don't know how. I mean,
if you've sold your song catalogue, are you still getting revenues from stuff played on Spotify? I mean, Bob Dylan sold all his songs, didn't he? So if you stream Bob Dylan's, I Want You this morning, would he get any money from it?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. And it may vary from deal to deal. But it's a funny old business, isn't it, really? And it's kind of interesting because it's a little bit parallel to what's happening in the world of streaming video at the moment. I don't know if you noticed this, But, it was the case about, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever. Most things were on Netflix. Yeah. Most of the obvious stuff was on Netflix. And that turned out to be such a money spinner, streaming film, that all the individual rights holders want to start their own. And so Disney, this is why Disney spent so much money on Get Back, because it's all a way of getting Disney into people's homes. And what Disney then started doing
been successful.
is reclaiming from Netflix their products onto their own service.
Yeah.
And the same thing will happen with Apple and will happen with other companies in the future, that people will seek to be more exclusive on services, which is, it's interesting, how that'll work in terms of the public, really, isn't it? How would you feel if you, if you could only get certain music on certain services, and then if you're going to have other music, you'd have to go to other services, which you'd also have to pay for. I don't know how people would feel.
Inconvenient, wouldn't it?
Well, it'd be expensive apart from anything else, I would have thought. I mean, Neil Young, to be fair, he's very well placed to do that, because he has built up his own Neil Young archive service, which he's been doing for a number of years.
Yeah, he has.
And you can pay
Neil Young. If he wasn't on Spotify, you can hear him in loads of places.
Well, you can hear Apple Music and all these other places. You can probably hear him on YouTube. I don't know. It's interesting. My son said to me the other day, completely out of nowhere, "Has Neil Young got a new album out by any chance?" I said, "Funny you should say that."
Good timing.
Yes, he appears to do. Neil Young is doing what Neil Young has done for quite a long time now, which is attend to the brand values of Neil Young. Nobody has worked harder than Neil Young.
And he does it brilliantly.
Polishing his brand values.
He is dressed as Neil Young.
He is dressed as Neil Young.
He's got a check shirt.
He's saying something Neil Young like.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of know what he's going to do, really.
Completely.
He does exactly what it says on the tin. So we shall have to see how this pans out in 6 months' time. I don't know.
The Word Podcast, prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So Adele calls off these shows, this run of shows in Las Vegas, just at pretty much at the last minute, massively inconveniencing a certain number of people who were determined to be the first ones to be there and shelled out for plane tickets and hotels and God knows what involved. The original, I mean, there's all kind of speculation about what caused the postponement. Was it COVID? Was it some kind of falling out with the set designer? The latest story I read this morning is they're falling out with her boyfriend. I don't know. But what you do know is this, Mark. Somewhere along the line, there was a catastrophic failure of nerve, wasn't there, about this whole thing? As they got nearer and nearer to doing it and rehearsed and prepared it and had a million meetings, they thought, oh, God, no, we can't go ahead for one reason or another. And
it is an amazing story, because she announced this 24 hours before the end of the show, wasn't she? And the excuse was, you say, that half the crew were done. Well, crew can be replaced. There was the argument with the designer, which may be the crucial issue, actually. But I mean, what was so astonishing is that people had flown. Yeah. Imagine this. Okay, you're a British fan of anywhere in the world. You've flown there. Tickets, I think the cheapest ticket was $85. I think a lot of people paying $700 per ticket. So you're flying to Las Vegas and all the complications that now involve.
Yes.
You're staying in a hotel. You're about to go the next night. And her response was A, to cancel the shows, and then B, to direct people. So I know you're disappointed, but there is a merchandise shop in Las Vegas, and if you go there, apparently you can get, pairs of Adele socks for £11 or a bottle of Adele branded wine for 55 quid. So you can go, but you're not going home empty-handed.
Yeah, at least it hasn't been wasted.
How furious would you be?
Yeah,
I can't get over it.
That wasn't very well judged.
And the other thing I think is interesting.
Go on.
No, I was going to say the other thing is interesting is that I don't think of Adele as being a wildly theatrical concept. No. I think
that was always the whole point, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
If
little
Rihanna,
me with my big voice.
Yeah. If it's
that was
Rihanna
the deal.
or it's Beyonce or something, and they say, "Oh, look, the set."
Yeah.
But there's some problems with the staging, and you think, okay, I'm not getting the experience that I expected. But Adele is about a voice and about a personality, and Adele could evidently just entertain you just sitting on a bar stool. So the idea that she's saying, "Oh, the sets weren't right," indicates the high priority these days about the idea of spectacle. Don't you think?
This has been the case in live musical entertainment since the Rolling Stones Steel Wheels tour. I don't know when that
giant
was.
inflatables.
They were the first people.
Yeah.
Mick Jagger was the first person, and Charlie Watts
were
the first people to realize, okay, if we're charging people more and more money, and we're citing them further and further away from the thing that they've come to see and hear, we have to do something to compensate for that distance from the thing.
Yeah.
And that's why when neighbors of mine go to see, huge, great, big, spectacular shows, the kind of things that people brag about having gone to see at neighborhood barbecues afterwards, they never, ever, in my experience, ever make any observation which could be described as musical. Ever.
No, never.
They never say, do you know the version of so-and-so they did?
No, never. They say, what was good about it? Well, what was good about it was the songs and the way she sung them. What they always say is, there are various shorthands, aren't there? One is fireworks.
Yes.
And I always think that about fireworks generally, actually. I don't mind a firework, but the concept of fireworks is just an instant shorthand for, it was amazing. Do you know what I mean? There were fireworks. Okay, right. I've got a mental image. How incredible this must be.
Sorry, can I interrupt? The proof of that is the use of fireworks at sporting occasions during the day.
Yeah.
When you can't bloody see them. But basically they're saying, I know you paid a fortune for this, but look, here's a few quid back that we're just...
And you can tell people there were fireworks.
Absolutely.
I can vaguely remember the well, not very, very clearly actually, the Dark Side of the Moon show at Nebworth, where it must be in 1975, and the Pink Floyd had a fly past with Spitfires, and then they had a plane going down a wire, wonky old model plane, not very big, going down a wire into the back of the stage, at which point it detonated a fireworks display. I can remember thinking, it was a bit weedy, but it made it very easy to tell people about the experience of being there.
Absolutely.
Because you didn't say, oh, well, they did a brilliant version of Money, whatever. You said there was this sort of spectacle.
Yeah,
it all became, and that's the absurd thing about Adele, is that nobody's expecting there to be kind of giant inflatables or cannons or, you know what I mean? Or
well, except if you're paying a lot of money, you maybe are. Because, I think if you pay more than a certain amount of money, and I don't know what it is, 50 quid, 80 quid or whatever, you're no longer paying for the music. You're paying for either the uniqueness of the occasion, so case in point, Kate Bush at Hammersmith.
Yeah.
Or you're paying for massive spectacle. If you go and see Beyonce, they're going to fill the stage with dancers. They just will, It will look like a West End show. In fact, that's the other thing that's interesting. During the 70s and 60s, there was nobody in the West End musical business involved in the popular music business. Nowadays, they really are. They're using the same designers, the same special effects as I use in the big, Andrew Lloyd Webber shows and so forth in the West End. And so the more you pay, the less it has to do with music, I think. That's the way it strikes me. And going back to my point about failure of nerve, if you're aware of how much your audience are paying, you start to get nervous that they might
be disappointed.
They might be disappointed. And so this is where you come up against the thing that every star musician has a problem with, which is imposter syndrome. Will they at some point, will I get rumbled at some point? Will people go, You're only Bruce Springsteen, or you're only so-and-so.
You're
it's
mortal.
A bunch of songs. People, you're mortal, absolutely. Whereas the deal is that they sort of believe you're immortal because that's why they pay that much money.
That's what justifies it.
And,
but also, you could argue that, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, if you started a tour, you could start a tour kind of unobserved.
Yeah, you could.
You could go off to Sweden and play in a little club and try out the material and do a few dates to warm yourself up.
Not anymore.
You could start at the Retford Porterhouse and not even the Record Mirror would be there to review you.
Yeah.
But now, whatever you do, it's just going to be internationally announced. And that, if it doesn't work, it's going to trip up the entire, publicity for your tours throughout the year, Oh, no, it's an amazing story. Have you been following the pop tiffs?
Top pop tiffs.
I love a pop tiff. But the Damon Albarn.
What's your favourite pop tiff of the week? I know what mine is. What's yours?
Well, it's Morrissey and Marr, I think.
Yeah, that's my favourite.
That's my favourite. No, but Damon Albarn, as far as I can see, Damon Albarn was talking to the LA Times, wasn't he?
Yes.
And was talking about very kind of condescendingly about Taylor Swift and saying she's a good songwriter because she has co-writers, so that doesn't count, which is kind of fundamentally wrong because she does have co-writers, but she's written a huge amount of material on her own. And the person that he really liked was Billie Eilish. Well, actually, Billie Eilish has a co-writer. Doesn't she write most of her songs with her brother?
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure. So I don't think he knew that either. He was watching one. Should be like Billie Eilish. And you could argue that anyway, even if you write your own songs, the lyrics and the music, the contributions of the people that perform that and arrange that, it is a big part of how it all turns out.
Definitely.
Everything's collaborative,
Absolutely.
But he had to offer
it's the apologies is what gets me. I seem to remember a time when rock stars, they didn't apologize and they didn't explain. They just kept going.
Yeah.
I kind of like that, really. Public apologies just drive me mad.
I do too.
Because it's never enough, is it, really? That they apologize copiously and then they have to go on TV and apologize again. And what do you want to do? Walk through the streets lashing themselves over their shoulders.
Birch twigs.
With birch twigs.
Exactly.
I don't know, really. But anyway,
there was a falling out between Cardi B. Did you follow that story?
She's got a big payoff.
Cardi B and Tasha K. And Cardi B is a kind of massive lawsuit. I think she's been awarded $4 million. I mean, unsurprisingly, this blogger has claimed that she was a prostitute, a cocaine user, and also various other rather unsavory things.
I tend to avoid saying that about anybody, really. I find it's a good rule of life.
Best not to say it in public. But I mean, $25,000 of the settlement was for medical expenses. So you're talking now here about people being upset by things, And if you can legally argue that you're upset and that your career has been temporarily derailed by something, then it's going to stop people making any comments about anybody, isn't it? The pop tiff is over.
Well, except it's never over as long as there's breath in Morrissey's body.
Oh, yeah.
Because when he published a statement on his website or his Facebook page.
Well, he called it an open letter. So it was very funny because that's so Morrissey. The idea of an open letter, And I think Johnny Marr said in response, the open letter hasn't been a thing since 1953. That was really true. No, but he's basically, Johnny Marr does tend to mention him, doesn't he? The things he tweets about.
Well,
why wouldn't you?
To be fair to Johnny Marr, surely whenever anybody sits down to interview Johnny Marr, they ask him about Morrissey. Surely they just do because they want a quote about Morrissey. It's one of those things.
That's the thing. Well, I mean, the trouble is that whatever they do individually, the two of them, can they ever do anything that will be more interesting than the faint possibility that Smiths might ever reunite? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it's so funny.
His open letter is, please, can I basically begging Johnny Marr not to mention him in interviews again? And you would have thought, well, that's a pretty kind of provocative thing to say on its own. But then he just goes on, doesn't he? He goes on and on and on. It's
But
like
he goes on in that way that Morrissey, he can't resist these kind of over-embroidered flourishes.
Yes.
There's one bit, I've got it here actually. There's one bit where he says, "Must you persistently?" I can't do his accent, but I kind of think of it as being
that accent is better than his.
Yeah,
that's the idea. It's the idea that he talks like a faded actor manager, like
it's a kind of thespian accent,
Donald Wolfett or something.
Exactly right. So must you persistently? It's the death of Chatterton. You know that painting? Kind of man on couch mopping with damp paw. Must you persistently, year after year, decade after decade, blame me for everything, from the 2007 Solomon Islands tsunami to the dribble on your grandma's chin? You know, it's just absolutely ridiculous, really.
It's like something written in a sixth form magazine, isn't it? That nobody bothered to cut. You know. That's the problem with Morrissey. Nobody cuts him, do they? As evidenced by Morrissey's "Do you remember it, or did it, or was it? Did it actually happen?" Morrissey's autobiography. Do you remember that?
Well, Morrissey's autobiography.
It was like a brick, wasn't it? It was clearly not been edited by anybody.
There hadn't been edited. It was full of ridiculously over-exaggerated flourishes to get your attention. There's a bit in that autobiography, I think, where he's in a 400-yard race or something at school, and his father's watching, and he comes fourth, and he says something like, and the father says, "You didn't win," and he looks away, and life decomposed in a bucket. I just think it's just so brilliant. I said, "Mate, you know what happens? You came fourth." It's not the end of that. Life decomposed in a bucket. There was another bit in the letter to Johnny Marr. He says, wherever I've got it here, he says, "You said you have positioned yourself ever ready as a rent-a-quote whenever the press require an ugly slant on something I half said during the last glacial period as the Colorado River began to carve out the Grand Canyon." He could say this has been going on a long time.
For a while.
For a while.
He's a person who really should have, confined himself to the strictures, the parameters, so to speak, of the pop song. Because there's a limit to how much of that you can do in a pop song.
Yeah.
A little bit of it goes a long way. The problem with Morrissey is once somebody gives him a page to fill, he absolutely fills it, doesn't he? With things he'd be better off not saying. And that's a classic case of classic.
It is. It's hilarious, I think. As you say, he's saying, "Don't mention me," and then just goes on mentioning him.
Absolutely.
Indefinitely.
Yeah.
It's terrific.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink, and it's like being in the pub.
That's very impressive.
Well, we're joined by our birthday guest, Patreon supporter, Kevin Rose. Kevin, you've come straight off the football pitch. Is that right?
I have. Well, off the side of the pitch. Yeah.
Go on. In what capacity? Go on.
Under 12s manager.
All right. How's the pressure being an under 12s manager? Presumably no different from being a manager of, say, Tottenham Hotspur. Go on.
Well, we're doing it slightly better than top Spurs.
Yes. All right.
Isn't there the danger that you could be sacked at any moment?
Well, my son wants to be back, but we are top of the table, joint. It's going to go down to the wire. I think it's going to head-to-head with a Dulwich team. So,
what's the name of the team?
Athenley Park. So we're a Peckham team. But I think Rio Ferdinand used to play for them. And there are 4 players in the Premier League who used to play for Athenley. But of course,
there's a proper team.
The club don't get any money for that, of course.
No, I'm sure. But no, you've obviously got a reputation. You attract talent.
Yeah,
so did you win today?
We did. We won 3-0. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Against the Lewisham team away in Bromley I'd be there at 9:30.
So how's the etiquette around young people's football nowadays? I haven't done this for years. I keep reading about, parents have been told not to shout at children on the pitch. And so do you get any of that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I try to stay when we can to go on the other side of the pitch to the parents. Because otherwise you can get embroiled in conversation with
I
parents.
bet you can.
And I know some leagues, they have this respect line. So they have a line that you've got to...
A respect line.
Oh, yes. My God, that's brilliant.
That's a good idea, you see.
You stand behind the respect line.
Whereas, and it does take you when you don't expect it. I have had a row with a ref once, which I wasn't pleased about, but it was actually the same guy as today, actually didn't remember it. But because he was a manager of the other team and he was just allowing them to kick 7 shades of what's it at us. But no, it's generally okay. You do get some after the game. There's a bit of after sometimes that other opposition parents will just come up to you. So
I bet.
it's
God,
interesting.
it must require ridiculous amounts of diplomacy.
I know. My son used to play rugby, and I used to go every week. And I have never been more involved in a sporting relationship in my life than just watching that with your own child. And I always think, what's it like if your child's David Beckham or what the hell is that like? You know, because you must go up and down according to how well they do.
Yeah, I mean, when we started, I think it was under 10s, under 9s, and we lost most of the games. And it is difficult to lift them up. And we played a team last week. They were really nice. The manager was really nice, but they were better than us in the first half, but they had no striker. And then we eventually scored and their heads went down. We beat them 7-0. And you do feel for people in that situation, but what do you do? But next year it goes up to 11 aside. So that's the big.
Oh, I see. So what are you at the moment? You're
9 aside. Yeah. But we play on big pitches. It does give you an insight into the, the whole thing about we should play in small pitches, small ball.
Yeah, no, sure.
We don't do. We just play big pitches. It's a lot of teams just hoof it up. So, but interestingly, my co-coach is younger than me, taller than me, and he's an Arsenal fan.
Right.
And so we have quite an interesting balance between Spurs and Arsenal. So, yeah.
Oh well, I'm glad you won today. So you're not going to be kicking the cat when you go home or whatever.
No.
Nobody's got anything to fear. Oh, yeah, Kevin, I'm going to throw this at you. We've just been talking about this. Bands whose songs have produced what are effectively slogans for the band themselves, to the extent that you might recognize the bands from the slogans. Okay? And I'm going to try this on you and see if you recognize
spontaneous pop quiz.
The acts. Okay, I'm going to start with a simple one. Gabba Gabba Hey.
Gabba Gabba Hey. Well, that's not simple. Gabba Gabba Hey.
Right, okay.
All right.
Gosh, I don't know.
Okay, I'll tell you, it's the Ramones. It's
I see. That's the one band that I missed the meeting for the Ramones. Maybe I'm too young.
Really?
By the time I listened to them, I thought, well, this is just 12 bars with, because I'm just that bit too young for that era, I think.
Oh, really?
Well, then you won't do terribly well on the What a Long Strange Trip It's Been.
Yeah, does that mean anything to you? What a long strange trip. That's the Grateful Dead from Trucking. What about Tramps Like Us?
Tramps Like Us. God.
No, that's Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. What about
I know that song? But I know the song.
It said Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. The Thin White Duke.
The Thin White
Duke. David Bowie.
That's David Bowie.
Yeah.
Do you know what song it's from? You see, that's people. It's from
Station to Station.
It is. It's Station to Station.
I'm redeeming myself slightly.
No, absolutely. No, listen, you're just a guinea pig. We're just talking about this. There's no shame whatsoever. What were the other ones we were talking about, Alex?
If you tolerate this,
we talked about. Yeah, if you tolerate this, your children will be next.
Is that Mannix?
Yeah.
There you go, you see. Yeah. So the people out there may have other ones that they'd like to suggest.
You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows.
You don't need...
Yeah.
That's Bob Dylan, you see. Well,
I think the ceremony is about to begin, which is in a Doors lyric. I think that's a kind of slogan. You can see them on a poster. If you said, if you were told that the band, well, this clearly wouldn't happen with the Doors, then if you saw, this particular slogan, you'd think that completely fits. That's what they're all about.
Yeah. There's probably a Pink Floyd one that Roger Waters.
There will be, won't they? I hadn't thought of Pink Floyd. There must be a Pink Floyd one. And guys,
about girl power.
Yes.
Girl power.
But that's like a slogan on its own, really, rather than something taken out of a song. So, Kevin, your birthday. When is your birthday? Is it today?
It was on Friday. Yeah.
All right. How did you celebrate?
I actually had my work's Christmas lunch.
Christmas,
yes, it was.
They got a bit cold. Did somebody put a saucer over it to keep it warm?
It was, a COVID-related postponement. Yeah. And then friends ran in the evening, and yesterday went to a nice restaurant. And today, actually, a friend of mine has got me a ticket with him to go and see the rooftop concert at the IMAX with a Q&A from Peter Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm very much looking forward to.
Is that now an edit? Just the concert? It is.
Well, he said it's the rooftop concert and maybe a little bit more.
You see, what it'll be, Mark, is what we saw
at the premiere.
What we saw at the premiere, because that was a cut of the best of
You'll be seeing the premiere basically.
Great,
which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And is Peter Jackson? Is he in the UK? Is he here?
Apparently so. Yeah, there's Q&A with him.
That's
live.
brilliant. What a
That's
fantastic present.
Yeah.
So does that mean you've watched all 6 hours plus?
Yeah. Very much. So a couple of times actually.
A couple of
I
times.
have too.
Not too young for
I'm
that.
back on the third now. I just can't stop. Yeah, I just can't stop.
Actually, the person
give us a favourite moment.
Certainly the. Oh, well, I like the bit. There's some strange bits where George is, the whole thing about the bow tie.
Oh yeah,
why he wants a bow tie, and then it's like they're not the right colour. And then the next day, John Lennon's wearing a bow tie as well when he's sitting on the floor, I think.
Which is the same bow tie.
No, but it's just that sort of. We fancy this, Mal. Can you?
Yeah, Mal is dispatched, isn't he, to go and buy one? I love that without any complaint at all. That's my job.
The great unexplained story of the first one is, and of course Mal Evans is no longer around to answer it, is where does he get a bloody anvil from?
In Twickenham.
In Twickenham. Yeah. I mean, what do you do? You can't go to an ironmonger's and say, "Do you happen to have an anvil around?" Surely they don't have them around, do they?
Then he had to lug it back.
They got to take it to the studio. It's absolutely fantastic.
But the whole thing, just the narrative of it is great. The first one ends with George leaving, and then the whole Billy Preston coming, and just the way that you actually see the Beatles as they could be as a really tight unit. And trusting people like Billy Preston, who they knew before they were famous, and just working, and in that sort of shorthand that they had between them. And they were really, despite all the rows and all the Alan Klein stuff, they were just in the moment. They were.
McCartney's always said this: when we were playing music, we were never a problem at all. It's only when we had a meeting. I tell you what struck me. I was thinking about this the other day. Is that John Lennon, died 40 years ago? Isn't it? Yeah, is that right?
41 now.
41
years ago, yeah.
So we've remembered him since via his quotes. And quotes have a tendency to be quite, bald and cold. Whereas when you see him talking, a live human being, there's a kind of warmth.
Yeah, there's
the undercuts,
a lightness, isn't there?
There is a lightness.
The colour.
Yeah.
It was a lot more animated than I expected him to be as well. I thought that in that later period, he just became a bit addled and kind of within himself, but he was a lot more sparky than I expected him to be, for sure. And as you say, there was, once you kind of got the paralinguistics around what he was saying as well, a whole new dimension became apparent to his Johnness.
What do you say? The paralinguistics?
Paralinguistics, yeah.
Wow. Never heard that.
Does that involve downhill skiing? I don't know what that is. Is that... Triple jump.
Linguistics, it's elements of communication that don't involve speech.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
So Kevin's our birthday guest, which is nice to see. Traditionally, with birthday guests, have you got a question or anything you'd like to raise?
Go on.
I've got a question for you guys, which is a sort of a two-parter.
All right.
But in your career as sort of music journalist, maybe smash hits onwards, whatever. Was there anybody that you really thought was fantastic? Sort of maybe championed a bit, but inexplicably never got the success they deserved. And on the flip side, was there somebody that you had to keep putting on the cover, but you, for the life of you, couldn't understand the attraction at all?
Well, there's always people that you learn slowly over a period of time that there's certain people there's just no point pushing. I always. Kirsty MacColl. I always thought Kirsty MacColl's a fantastic songwriter, fantastic artist. I actually, it's my claim to fame, put her on the cover of Smash Hits in what must have been when, Mark?
Would have been, I guess, 1980 or 81. It was the time of, there's a guy down chip shop swears he's Elvis. I think it was 81, yeah.
Okay. And... but, there was never any great following wind behind Kirsty MacColl. It's what you learned. I tell you what you learned about this is that it's more than just talent. It's more than just music. There were not loads of people who wanted to be identified as Kirsty MacColl fans. They might like her, but, it didn't mean anything more than the music. And so I always backed Kirsty MacColl all the way she was making records. And behind everything I ever wrote about her, there was a slight hurt. It never really took off, and but that's just the way it is. And Of course, and equally, you learn that lots of people that you don't particularly like don't warm to yourself, but are really popular with people.
Yeah.
And even those people I've sort of warmed to over the years. We were talking about one the other day, Mark and I, with somebody who was a birthday guest or whatever, talking about Gary Newman.
Yeah.
And now I look at Gary Newman, and it's 40, 50 years later, I think.
With real fondness.
I think, best of luck to you, Gary Newman. You got away with it. You kept it going for years. You haven't gone mad, and lots of people have. Whereas at the time I used to think, oh, tosser, but you just.
But that's only because he seemed kind of dull and uncooperative,
Yeah,
But no, the interesting thing I think is that there are a load of people you put on the cover that you didn't feel any particular response to, but they just had a constituency, and the people who sold were people who people absolutely adored.
Yeah.
So it's the Nick Caves, and it's the Joni Mitchells, and it's the Tom Waits. It's people that they don't have an enormous following. That the following they do have is very, very, very devoted.
It's they're seen as standing
who didn't
for
sell,
something.
people who are just really, really popular, like Phil Collins. Put Phil Collins in the front of a magazine, it would die like a louse in a Russian's beard. Was it Dido? Do you remember that, Dave? I once put Dido on the cover of a magazine. Disaster, because there's no real fan base.
No,
it's popular,
And is there?
Go on.
I was just going to say, David, on the back of what you said, my other sort of thought was are there people who back in the day were really obnoxious and now have maybe either through just the passage of time or somebody had a word with them and said, look, if you're going to make a comeback, you can't be a total whatever. And I'm not saying Gary Newman because you mentioned Gary Newman.
No, I know. I've no reason to believe Gary Newman's ever been obnoxious. But I think what happens is when people are okay, this is what happens with being a pop star. There are two states of being a pop star. The first state is nobody wants to know. The second state is everybody wants to know. There's nothing in between. And so pop musicians go from, desperately trying to get noticed to desperately trying to make the world go away immediately overnight. And so when you meet them, it's generally at the point when they're absolutely on top of the tree and everybody wants a piece of them. And then if they're ever going to manifest any arrogance, they're going to manifest it at that point. 40 years later, they're not often like that at all because they've seen the world change, And the thing I find is really odd, and I'm sure Mark's found the same thing, is if you're kind of around this world for a long period of time, people assume they've met you, even though they haven't. And so, I might meet somebody who I've written about years ago, and they go, how you doing? And I think, you never met me at all. I've never met you. You just kind of think we
assume
have.
You must have bumped into them.
Kind of been in the same world, And so after a while, there's a kind of survivors fraternity, kicks in. We're all still here, So people are less edgy when they're in the 60s and 70s.
Unless you're
What do you say, Mark?
Well, I was going to say that talking about what Kevin was saying, that it's the old gag, isn't it? It's the old gag that they used about Hollywood and about everyone, about fame. Yeah. So it's always kind of, there are 4 stages of fame, aren't there? Which is, who's Mark Armand? Get me Mark Armand. Get me the new Mark Armand. And who's Mark Armand? That's just, you're going to put any name in there at all. And that's the process that you go through as somebody achieving some kind of notoriety. And it must be really hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people who are really difficult. The most difficult David I ever dealt with, he's not around now to defend himself, would be Lou Reed, I think. He was just absolutely the most unbelievable curmudgeon. And which was preposterous because Lou Reed spent more of his life talking to the press than virtually anybody else. But he claimed to loathe and detest and mistrust the press. But without the press, he wouldn't really have got any publicity. He needed explaining.
It's like Van Morrison. The reason Van Morrison doesn't like interviews is he does so many bloody interviews. If he really didn't want to do interviews, he wouldn't do them at all. But
I have a very brief anecdote about Lou Reed, which is a friend of mine. She had this boyfriend who was a Welsh guy, and they went to New York for a week on holiday. And he said, we're going to see my uncle. And then they rang up he rang up and he said, yeah, come round. And he said, we're going to my friend's house, Lou's house. So they went round, and it was when they reformed back in the 90s, was it?
Yeah.
And Lou Reed had just moved, him and Laurie Anderson, to this place. And they didn't have any things up apart from pictures of Lou.
That's weird. Do you know what the 3 other members of the Velvet Underground were doing when they reformed? Which was, I think, was 2003. I can't remember now. It's really interesting. They, Mo Tucker was working for Walmart.
Yes.
Sterling Morrison was piloting
a riverboat or something.
A riverboat. He was a riverboat pilot. I mean, John Cale obviously was making very, very, very avant-garde and uncommercial music, and Lou Reed was Lou Reed. So they were all really pissed off when they all got back together again. And he kind of blew it for them. Mm. He completely blew it. He was utterly miserable and negative and horrible to everybody. And it was their one big chance to get back. And it could have been such...
But you see, it's a bit like the Sex Pistols arriving in America. Why did the Sex Pistols never make it in America? Because the Sex Pistols could never arrive in America and go, it's great to be in America. No. It couldn't work. Mm. Similarly, the Velvet Underground cannot reform and go, do you know, it's brilliant to all be together, put our arms around each other. No, you know,
it doesn't suit the whole concept of
the concept doesn't work like that.
It's like I saw them at Glastonbury. It must have been that year. I think it was 2000. They came on at 3:00 in the afternoon on a day like today, not a cloud in the sky, with their black shirts and things. And already it seemed wrong. I mean, it's lovely to see them. It just didn't seem right. The Velvet Underground, the most nocturnal concept ever invented. We're now playing in the middle of a field in glorious sunshine. In Somerset,
yes,
outside, you know,
it doesn't work. Does it?
It doesn't work.
No.
Well, look, Kevin, it's been very nice to join you. For you to join us to join you, whatever, on your birthday. And it sounds to me as if you got a really good day sorted out. Your team won 3-0. You're off to see a Beatles film and a special press conference. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's ever an alcoholic drink involved at some point in the day.
Yeah, so a splendid day. And Spurs aren't playing, so they can't lose.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So it's going to be a good
relax.
God's in his heaven, all's well with the world.
Yeah.
All the very best.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
So welcome back. Any other business? Well, it wasn't Kevin Rose good, our birthday guest.
Really good.
Coming
really
straight
good.
on
Really interesting questions.
Off the football pitch. So if you are a Patreon supporter, you know, you can get your birthday marked in this fashion. And if you're not a Patreon supporter, maybe you'd like to consider becoming a Patreon.
And don't forget, if it's your first birthday, I mean, the first time we're celebrating your birthday, your first birthday, we do come down your digital chimney and rifle through your record collection.
We do.
Show off all the things you've got.
Have we got anybody new joined this august company in the last week or so?
Bosun's whistle is out.
The Bosun's whistle is out.
That's great.
We do indeed. Okay, so we have Steve Clark.
Steve Clark, good man. Welcome aboard.
I can hear the faint Bosun's
whistle. Dog whistle. It's a bit inaudible, Dave.
It's hopeless, this. I'll tell you why. Much as I appreciate Dave Holly buying this for us, I think it's a very difficult instrument to make, the Bosun's whistle. I think it's fair to say.
It cuts out, doesn't it?
It does.
I couldn't hear a lot, but I saw a load of Labradors congregating outside my window just then.
I was reading a thing this week, Ken Scott, the memoirs of Ken Scott, the engineer and producer. And Ken Scott was the engineer on a really good, frankly, we have to call a seminal hard rock album. Which is called Jeff the Mate. All right, you've got to guess. It's a seminal hard rock album, and Ken Scott engineered it. What is it, Mark Allen?
Yeah, what era are we talking about? We talk about the Metallica.
We're talking about 1968. It's a seminal hard rock album.
Seminal hard rock.
It was made at Abbey Road Studios, and it's not Deep Purple. You're in the right region. You're in the right area. Never got its due. A whole lot of it turned up.
Is it a Black Sabbath record?
No, it's not a Black Sabbath record. A whole lot of it, some might say, turned up the following year on the first Led Zeppelin album. But I'm talking about Truth by the Jeff Beck Group.
Jeff Beck, yes.
Which is, if anybody's never heard it, it's a fantastic record. Jeff Beck Group at the time was Mickey Waller on the drums, Ron Wood on the bass guitar, Jeff Beck on guitar, and somebody called Rod Stewart singing. And they also had Nicky Hopkins on piano. And they made it at Abbey Road. And they decided they did Morning Dew, the Tim Rose song.
Yeah.
And they decided that for some reason they wanted bagpipes on it. And so No trouble at Abbey Road. Oh, they just ring up the bagpipe guy. He comes straight round, some uncredited Scottish musician. And Ken Scott had the problem of how do you mic bagpipes?
Oh, that's good.
Because you first of all have to work out where the noise is coming from. And it's apparently
hell,
quite...
surely.
Sorry?
The depths of hell, surely.
But it comes from the top of the pipes rather than the thing that you're playing at the bottom, isn't it? Isn't that right? I think it does.
He had great difficulty miking it. He had to try loads and loads of mics in different areas.
That's the other weird thing about the bagpipes is that they keep playing even when the person isn't blowing on the thing. Because all you got to do is inflate the bag. And it's the bag, isn't it, that keeps the wind going out.
It reminds me of the old joke about the problem with male ballet dancers, that not everything stops when the music does. So anyway, that's the bosun's whistle and the bagpipes and the genitalia
We have some more
of male
patrons,
ballet dancers. Go on.
We
Alex,
do.
Go on.
Chris McCourt.
Hello,
Chris.
Chris.
An old friend
Hello,
of mine. Lovely.
Is he really?
Bless him. Yeah, he is.
Oh, right. Very
Chris,
good.
now in the
Very
south
good.
of France. Lovely.
Oh, right. Gosh. Go on.
Simon Allen.
Hello, Simon.
Hello, Simon.
Nice to have you on board.
The mysterious O.
No,
Is it just somebody called
the
Are they
big
called
O?
O or the mysterious O?
I just have O.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
David Martin.
Good
That's
man,
straightforward, David.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Steve Pride.
Steve
Pride.
Bride.
They must all
Excellent.
now be feeling a bit prosaic compared to the big O.
Yeah.
The mysterious O.
Yeah. So if you'd like
Very
to
good.
join that company, patreon.com/word in your ear. Patreon supporters will soon be getting early notice of an exciting event that we've got coming up later in the year, Alex.
Indeed.
What's the date? Remind me of the date. It's in June, isn't it?
The date is June the 18th, which is
June the
Saturday.
18th. Either Saturday, June the 18th, in Holland Park in West London.
We can guarantee glorious sunshine.
We can
We have
guarantee
booked
glorious
as well.
sunshine.
Last year.
Yes, we
and
did it
were
last
right.
year. Yeah, we're going to have a second word in your park. And so Patreon supporters will be getting notice of that before anybody else does.
We
And
should
be
also
able to
probably mention
book.
that we're going to be imminently dropping, as the kids say, a new Patreon-only series, aren't we?
Oh,
yeah,
right.
that's true, that's
Dropping,
true.
yes.
Dropping.
We will
Yeah.
be dropping a new series, especially for Patreon supporters, which we're calling Down the Rabbit Hole.
It's good stuff.
And basically, there are some conversations of a rockular nature
Rockular, yeah.
that are so strange and obscure, and so related to our own personal enthusiasms that usually they only take place on the telephone between me and Mark Ellen, or the two of us in a pub. Well, we decided that there might be some people who would enjoy hearing some of those conversations. And so we just pick an obscure subject, and I believe the expression is dilate upon it.
No,
Is that
that's
fair?
good. Oh, that's great.
Dilate upon it for, I don't know, 20 minutes.
We
And,
investigate with ridiculous enthusiasm for tiny, tiny details,
we just
which we love, and we think you might too.
we pick, we search, we scan rock's rich tapestry with our fingertips until we find a loose thread. And then we just tug, and we dug, we dug, and we dug.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.